Chapter 1 on Wearing Hats. Halfway down the stairs, I remember that I left my hat in the cab. It reminds me of Dan, who never wore a hat, even in January's weather. Dan is idea inextricably linked to Ernest Hemingway, who never wore a hat either, but always at a rakish angle when he did. It was November of last year, or maybe it was a few years since, that I fell in love with Dan. It was the start of a bad turn. Dan was the tombstone heir of the Bronx, taken in by a lady who hoped to rise. It was Saturday morning when we met. The weather that day was exactly like today. There was the smell of the Columbia game in the air, and a roar of marigolds that I had been cutting on my hands. And when Dan pulled up and asked if I wanted a ride, it was the first of 1,000 of thoughtlessly kind acts that made me love him. He called me Marigold Boy. We rode off, not even bothering to close the gate or feed the cats. See his hands and newly washed, wavy hair in the autumn light. I was sure I'd never been in love before. For my part, I never had a chance of not being taken in hand. The bus always smells of insecticide. It was in anthropology where we were studying the Kikuyu, a matrilineal people of East Africa, that Dan said, "Read Hemingway." He gave me a copy of The Sun Also Rises. Its pages were falling out. Later he said, "Going to Pamplona to run with the bulls. You really must come." We flew Iceland Air, 199 round trip, open return. New York to Luxembourg, stopping in Reykjavik. Before boarding, Frances, the lady who had Dan, smoked pot in the deserted chapel, while Dan and I took tea in its smudgy garden. The sun also rises in a sinister book if read too soon in life. Now when I reread it, I see it for what it is, an existential parable, but then I thought it was a blueprint. Tonight I dream again of being trapped in a museum in the rain at the end of the world. I feel the desperation and the sadness, and the sun pelting and puddling the marble steps. The clouds close like a curtain.